evening. It is 6:31. We will start the meeting in the council chambers. At 6:30, this is the regular council meeting. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, identify possible conflicts of interest. Seeing none, move on to item D, public comment, period, correspondence. At this time, I will recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. Council may act in emergency matters introduced by members of the public, and you have 5 minutes. Our first is Bruce, and I'll let you pronounce your last name. Thank you. Would you like to press the microphone, please? There's a little zero underneath there. There you go.
Okay.
And state your name and address, please.
Bruce Krawas. I live at 1600 North Hills in Marshfield, and I'm a pathologist at Marshfield Clinic, and now I have a position at Marshfield Research Institute. And I wanted to bring to your attention this document that's on the screen. It's called Implications of Climate Change for the U.S. Army. And it is a study that was done by the U.S. Army War College. And anybody who wants to can go online and do a search under that title, Implications of Climate Change for the U.S. Army, and download the report yourself. It's 75 pages long, but the first 4 pages are a summary. So you really only have to read 4 pages, and I hope very much that you will. Could you go to the next slide? The second slide is a summary of the U.S. War College report. I think everyone knows that climate change will cause more heat waves, more floods, and more droughts. And the Army predicts that as a result, there will be crop failures. It'll be more difficult to obtain fresh water. And the biggest worry of the Army is that cities and military bases will have to be abandoned because of sea level rise or because of extreme heat, causing population displacement within the U.S. and also worldwide. The Army also says that there will be an increase in tropical infectious diseases because the insects and other organisms that carry these diseases will move toward the North Pole and the South Pole. And possibly some of you remembered last summer that there were several cases of malaria in Florida among Florida residents who had not left the state. And you might say that that's just the first inkling of this concern about tropical diseases. In our state, we will likely see a lot more Lyme disease than we have in the past because as winters get warmer, fewer ticks will die in the winter, and as the summer gets longer, the chance of being bitten will become more likely. Next slide, please. These are 2 quotes from the report, and I'm not going to read them to you, but I would ask you to look at the screen and take a look at them. I'm sure you can all read them just fine. Okay, and then the last slide. This last slide does not come from the U.S. Army report. This is a very recent slide that comes from the Maricopa County Department of Public Health. And Maricopa County is the county in which Phoenix is located, the city of Phoenix. And Phoenix has the dubious distinction of being possibly the hottest city in the United States, but they're arguing with Las Vegas about that. Anyway, this chart from the Public Health Department shows the number of people who died from heat stroke in the last 10 years in Maricopa County. And you can see that in 2013, there were 76 deaths. In 2014, there were 61 deaths. And in 2023, there were 645 deaths. So the number of heat stroke deaths increased by about a factor of 8 or 10 in 10 years. And this is actually climate change. This is exactly what climate change is. And possibly 15 or 20 years from now, you'll be looking at a graph like this, but it'll be for Wisconsin or it'll be for Marshfield. So that's everything that I have to say.
Thank you. And council members, you have a little card that I passed out from Bruce. You want to just look at some of the websites? Next, Pam Nikolai, please.
Is it still on? Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'm Pam Nikolai. I'm at 1203 Adler Road. I'm here today after finding out that a post on Wildwood Zoo's Facebook page was taken down. It was a summer fun post with the Kodiak bears enjoying some brightly colored popsicles. Yes, they were rainbow colored popsicles, but no mention of pride. There were over 400 likes and love reactions, 2 laughing reactions, 1 wow reaction, and 0 angry reactions. Majority of the comments were positive, and some asked where they can donate sugar-free Jell-O. There was a comment about Jesus's rainbows, and one asking if the bear was male or female. The zoo responded that it was a male at 1,200 pounds, and the commenter then talked about assuming the bear's gender, and then mentioned pride. My guess is the commenters knew some of the council members and complained to them, who then complained to the city administrator, who had the zoo post removed just because it was using rainbows. I hope for a community where we support our queer citizens and don't support bigotry. I hope someone here can provide some insight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Matthew Sampson.
Matthew Sampson, 608 North Schmidt. On what she just said, if I recall, the rainbow is generally used in schools and with children and in churches because it's God's promise. So we should probably put that post back up for this event for the zoo to attract kids and families all summer on Wednesday. What I came to talk about was Mr. Stauber and Mr. Ken here, who I think is here to talk about shutting down the EDB. And if I recall correctly, recently you, Mr. Stauber, recommended him for chair, and he didn't get the votes, and then he stormed out of the room during the meeting, right? And then just a few weeks later, you're recommending we shut down the EDB, the same EDB that kept the shoe company from leaving, which you're on that board, right? Correct?
No comments.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
So you're on that board. You're recommending it be shut down after your friend doesn't get the chair. It's kind of suspicious. Would you be making that recommendation if he had gotten the chair? I think you should suspend this reading of this, the first reading of this, and look into that. It's inappropriate. It screams inappropriate. It's a duck, right? Quack. Walks like a duck. The duck. Yeah. Also, I wanted to come and speak previously about the bathrooms. There's a lot of money. It's way too much money, and then we're still going to have porta-johns there. And I don't think that the quoted $60,000 a month for porta-johns at the Wenzel Plaza was accurate. I think that was a little inflated by a lot. Because I looked up pricing per day for porta-johns, and if you had 6 of them out there for the summer, it's not $60,000 a month. But anyhow, I do not believe that Natasha Tompkins found 57 or whatever people that all shared her same opinion, and she picked them at random. I think that she looked at people who she thinks like her, asked them the question, got the expected answer, or asked loaded questions to lead them into the answer. And I find it disgraceful that we had the patriarch of the Wenzel family come in here and speak out against it. We're still going to do it. We had business owners nearby speak out against it. We're still going to do it. And we're still going to have portages. Because when we have events and big things in the summer, 2 large family-sized bathrooms isn't going to be enough. If you've got one person in there taking 10 minutes with a line out there, you're still going to need porta-johns to relieve bladders. So there's a better solution. And I heard tell that there's a house nearby who offered to lease out for a very low price part of the first floor of their house for bathrooms for the plaza at a very reasonable, low, affordable price. And that seems to have been skipped over as well. So that's all I got. Have a good day.
Thank you. Next, Chris Howard.
Hello, I just had a couple more things to say about the Wenzel bathrooms as well. Wanted to thank you again. Oh, I'm sorry.
Your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry. Chris Howard, 402 West Park Street here in town. Wanted to thank you once again for continuing the conversation regarding the plaza bathrooms. $250,000 decisions should require talking, analyzing, exploring options, and gathering all of the information you need. I don't fault anyone on the council for initially approving the plan to build permanent bathrooms within the green space of the plaza. It was a decision you made based on the facts you had at the time, and it would arguably be an improvement over porta potties. There's no doubt that each one of you wants to make good decisions that benefit this community. You're all intelligent, but more than that, you're all courageous. I know that tens of thousands of dollars have already been spent preparing to build bathrooms, and you're going to need your courage to go in a different direction now. But your constituents will understand. They will applaud your decision to not throw good money after bad. It's time to cut your losses. Yesterday, I met with Pat Kilty to see what challenges there might be with making the bathrooms near the back entrance of Blodgett House available for public use. The only renovation needed would be moving a set of double glass doors back 10 feet. This would separate the private area of Blodgett House while making available to the public a 2-stall bathroom for ladies, a 2-stall bathroom for gentlemen, and a unisex bathroom that's handicap accessible. By my count, that's more than double the capacity of the proposed $250,000 bathrooms. I would be happy to meet with any or all of you at Blodgett House so I can show you the space. Just let me know what time works for you. Rent would need to be negotiated and utilities figured out, but there's no reason why these bathrooms couldn't be ready for public use this summer. Also, storage space at Blodgett House could be made available to the plaza this summer. And bands could have a green room this summer to relax and prepare for their concerts, something that is often written into their contracts to perform. An alternative to building bathrooms needs to be explored and explored quickly. The opportunity to use the Boucher building disappeared years ago. I heard that the High Street building was once under consideration. Now it's been sold. The former tattoo building was a possibility. Now it's been rented to someone else. When I spoke to the council 6 weeks ago, I thought the opportunity to use Blodgett House was also gone. But with Katie in the process of buying the building, this option has come full circle and it's available again. Let's move forward on this opportunity now. Thank you.
Mary Jo Wheeler.
Mary Jo Wheeler Schuler, 10641 County Road H, Marshfield, Wisconsin. I'm not here to talk about EDB, although you probably all think I am. I still have not heard back from the council member that brought this forward. I did send an email. As chair, I thought before first reading, we should have conversation as board members. So I'm not here to air dirty laundry that way. I also would like to agree with Howard's and a lot of people in this community with the bathrooms. I think if we're planning on doing a second street corridor, $250,000 for bathrooms is absolutely ridiculous when it's just going to be 2 stalls. We have the Baltus building, and yes, Natasha, people have to cross the streets to get to the pads as well. And we have the Howards that are willing, or whoever's willing with the Blodgett building. But I am here to talk about covenants and restrictions. So our Mill Creek Business Park, there's 18 open saleable lots. 8 are occupied. That's 30% occupancy. I've cited some of the paragraphs because today I spent about a half hour of my time reading through the Mill Creek Business Park Protective Covenants and Restrictions, all 23 pages, plus 5 pages of amendments. I have 2 thoughts after reading through this document. First, is this body a homeowners association or a development board? Are we here for economic development and increasing the tax base in the city of Marshfield? Second, are we trying to literally chase businesses away? The document makes it seem like we're in the position to turn interested businesses away left and right. The fact is we're not. The park is sitting at 70% empty, and there's no sign of that changing. I worked very hard to make sure Weinberner Shoes Thorogood, Jeff, doesn't leave and go to Eagle Pass, Texas. And our EDB board worked very hard to make sure that happened. That's 130 jobs for the city of Marshfield, people that buy groceries, people that buy cars, people that send their kids to school, people that pay taxes. We shouldn't be placing such micro-level restrictions on businesses in any case, but especially now, when there is no interest for businesses to move in. We cannot afford to be so suffocating. Look at some of the stipulations. Dictating the building material, siding, paint colors, and approval for any change, big or small. It's ridiculous. If I was a business owner moving into that park, I would probably look at Spencer or Stratford. In fact, today I picked up the phone and I called the number on the bottom of your map, Tom, and I got flipped to synchro or voicemail. And I asked a couple of the council people to also call that number. I've never received a call back. So let's pretend I'm willing to put a $20 million business in that business park. I still haven't gotten a call back. I called Spencer. Nice guy answered the phone, talked to me, said, how can we help? What can I do? When do you want to build? I said, I'm just looking at putting up a sports complex, just wondering if I can do that. Absolutely. Do you have any open space? Absolutely. Our map online, though, isn't accurate, but I'll send it to you. Just give me your email address. The tale of 2 cities, right? One that actually cares and one that doesn't. We're losing tax dollars, business presence, employee spending power because some people refuse to acknowledge that this document has been overbearing and unnecessary for years. I'm not suggesting that there's no restrictions, but something has to change. All of these measures and placing prohibitive costs, burden that is keeping businesses away. The couple businesses that are out there had to add on 8 feet of brick on the outside, the whole length of their building. You have to have the one business I called today, because I talked to a gentleman and he said, oh yeah, I know a business that didn't move in there. I said, who? So I found him, called him, because we were asked that at EDB, like what businesses have decided not to move in? I'm actually picking up the phone and calling because Karen from the chamber couldn't answer that for us. I don't know why, but he said, yeah, he said the last place he would move is Marshfield. He moved his cabinet creation place in Spencer. Miller Brewing is another one, and Shrimp Pack up in Stratford. Those are 3 businesses I know of right now that did not build in Marshfield because we weren't welcoming. And maybe it's just a matter of all getting together and talking and saying, hey, we want some restrictions, but we're open for business. Let's start with answering our phone. Hi, thank you for calling Marshfield. We welcome you to our business park that's open. Ultimately, do we really care if the business park is the same shade of beige or paved parking lots and covered AC units? Even if the answer is yes, it's awfully hard to apply those standards when 70% of the lots sit empty. I am proposing a complete revision of the covenants and restrictions based on the input from council members, constituents, and current business park residents. I also talked to several business park residents. And Tom Churchy, I did ask if he listened to the EDB meeting, not this last month, the month before, and he didn't. These are our constituents. These are the business owners. We had Dale Anderson, Mitch Schindler, Joe Kanichke, Marty Drexler all say that these covenants and restrictions are too restrictive.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Your 5 minutes are up.
No problem.
Next, Ken Bargander.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not here to talk about toilets.
Your name and address, please.
Actually, I'm here to.
No, name and address, please.
Okay. Ken Bargender. I live at 206 Hawthorne Avenue here in Marshfield. I am currently the Vice Chair of the Economic Development Board, and I'm the Vice Chair of the City of Marshfield Board of Review. I just wanted to come up after Mr. Sampson accused me of storming out of a meeting because I didn't get the chair position. I just want to set the record clear. I have been the chair in the past. I've served the city for 18 years. I'm more than qualified to have that position. I think that's why Mr. Stauber nominated me, okay? As far as storming out, Lois T-Strake knows this for a fact. That morning, there was a virtual conflict. The Board of Review, which only meets once a year, started at 8 o'clock. That meant that after the elections at the EDB meeting, I immediately had to leave the community center and hightail it back here before 8 o'clock when that meeting started. So don't accuse me of leaving the meeting, storming out. That's not a fact. And I really should get an apology, public apology from you, because that's absolutely not true. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Any other citizens want to make a comment? Any other citizen want to make a comment? Any other citizen want to make a comment? Seeing none, move on to item E, approval of minutes, May 28th, 2024, regular meeting. Motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Giles. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you. Item F, staff updates.
I'm not aware of any this evening.
Item G, mayor's comments. I have, as my papers are sticking together, we have a couple of awards that are pretty exciting. Locals earned Wisconsin Invasive Species Awards. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, DNR, congratulates the winners of the 2024 Wisconsin Invasive Species Council's Invasive Species Action Awards, held on June 5th at the Necedah National Wildlife Refuge, previously known as the Invader Crusader Awards. These individuals and groups in professional and volunteer settings positively help fight against invasives. Marshfield resident Dan Umhafer earned one of the 13 prestigious awards for his work in removing invasive species from Marshfield parks and trails and restoring its ecological diversity by planting and nurturing service flora. He is also instrumental in fighting noise pollution by doing all his work by hand with a bow saw. Think about that, everybody. This manual labor has transformed local environments in an unobtrusive and ecologically friendly way. I really wish that Dr. Bruce was still here to hear this, because that is a huge deal. Our second is the Koppel family from the town of Spencer, also earned one of the prestigious awards. Barry Koppel, Mary Berg Koppel, and their grandson Christopher. They have provided more than 250 hours of volunteer work to provide purple lucite biocontrol to numerous locations in central and northeast Wisconsin, including their 70-acre restored prairie just north of Marshfield. They've created a self-sustaining insectary of Gaylord sealer beetles to feed on the invasive plants. All the award recipients used many different approaches in their fight to ward off the invasive plant species, but each winner is united in pulling in long hours on the ongoing battle against the spread of these invasive species. I think we should give them a round of applause. And the reason I read this is because we know we have great people and great things happening. And there ends my report. Item H, council comments. Alderman Spiros.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in the spirit of congratulating people, I wanted to, if you didn't already know this, I wanted to congratulate Nasonville Dairy's Sarah Griesbach, who is the third woman in the state of Wisconsin ever to achieve Master Cheesemaker. I think that's a very big accomplishment, and I think that everybody here likes Nasonville cheese, so I wanted to just give her a shout out on that.
Thank you. I challenge 2 next month, okay? How's that? Moving on to city administrators update.
I have 3 things this evening. First of all, a reminder that we have the special meetings coming up on the 2025 to 2029 capital improvement program. They will be back-to-back Thursdays, Thursday, June 20th and Thursday, June 27th, both here at 7 p.m. Also, I had sent an email earlier today and I printed it out, and amazingly, what I put on your desk tonight was not the right memo. But hopefully most of you have seen it. This goes back to a Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee item that's on the consent agenda. It's K5A. It's turning back the CDBG RLF Revolving Loan Fund Housing Rehabilitation Grant Program back to the state. There was a question raised, the committee did recommend approval. There was a question raised at that meeting, though, as to whether or not the money that the city would hand back to the state would then be earmarked for being provided as loan money to our residents. And the answer actually is no. But having done some checking, had finance do some good checking on this, but in the past few years, there's no indication that anybody didn't get funded as part of that. The dollar amounts, I think I have put on your table, that as far as how much money is in that pool for this area of Wisconsin, sort of surrounding Juneau County. And the program, brings in more money. The administrative costs drop to nothing for us as opposed to what we've had to pay in the past. And all in all, there's no indication at all that anyone from Marshfield would be turned down, because it doesn't appear to have happened to anybody in the surrounding counties in recent years. So with that, staff would still be supportive of the recommendation that we move forward with moving to the state on the administration of that program. And then finally, just want to note that there was a parking issue raised at the last meeting. Councilmember Stauber, under items from future agendas, was asking, how we can deal with that. We are going to run it through Board of Public Works later this summer. We're going to gather some information. Again, the constant discussion about 90-minute parking, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? So that will not be forgotten, but that will end up back at Board of Public Works first. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Administrator Barg. Item J, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Seeing none, item K, consent agenda. A motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Varsho. Alderman Wagner. Mike, please. Your microphone, please. Thank you.
This comes from, okay, I'm item K1, please. That's the Economic Development Board reports. Hi.
Oh, item 1. Okay.
5A? No.
Item 1. Yeah.
Yeah, the minutes.
Yep.
I think so.
Get a motion for approval. They got one.
Yep. We did motion for approval.
Of the other items.
Yep. And a second. Alderman Giles, Alderman Varsho.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
Item carries. Now we'll go back to the item pulled by Alderman Wagner.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, actually, I saw where the chairman of the Economic Development Board recommended approval of a grant to the Catholic schools and for the gymnasium, a donation for the new gymnasium. And I wanted to make sure that one of the things nice about being an old fossil like me is you remember when things happened. Back years ago, they put in a form so they could address how nonprofit can apply for funds from the Economic Development Board. And that happened, they put it into the form of a city policy, and it's policy number 4.450. And I've happened to bring one with me in case you need it. But it gives you a real good set of guidelines on how to apply for the funds for for a nonprofit requesting funds. I think this has fallen into down the rabbit hole because a lot of people don't remember it. But there is a way of doing this. I'm not trying to slow down or hold up anything. I want to just make sure that everybody follows the rules and goes by that the right way. So I will make sure that you get a copy of this before we leave here tonight. If that's okay with you.
And Ed, you're speaking of the Columbus Catholic when they came.
Columbus,
yes, not just in gymnasium, their whole plan that they've got going on, because I see two sets of eyes wondering what's going on here. So that's what, if you watch the economic development.
Right. So, but anyway, I saw it on there's it needs to be given serious consideration and look at, and I think I just want to remind them that was available at their disposal. So.
If I can add, the Finance Director, Jennifer Solinsky, did flag that a couple of days ago, and I've shared that with the City Attorney today, and I want him to look at it and see the applicability of that policy to this particular circumstances. That was approved back in 2018. It was really dealing at the time with the fact that we had everybody in the annual budget. We're giving money to lots of non-government organizations. Right. But I want to get a ruling on him on the applicability of that to this circumstance and how to use that in terms of dealing with this request.
Yeah, and the point is I wanted to make sure that everybody was playing by the same set of rules.
Absolutely.
Okay, do you two know what he's speaking about? Because I see the eyes and the faces, so I just want to make sure that you both.
Pull that.
He pulled
in their minutes.
I thought we pulled 5A.
No, I pulled.
No.
K1.
So what?
K1.
K1. That's what I
The
did.
Economic Development
I
Board.
don't know what you were doing.
Was it the May meeting or the June meeting?
Well, the June meeting, the motion was made by the Economic Development Board to support funding and send it to the elected officials. It was talked about in the May meeting. It shows up in the May minutes, okay. I think, because the coach was there making a presentation about the project.
Okay.
So,
okay. Thank you.
Okay. And I'll make sure she gets a copy of this. Okay.
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Varsho, and your motion is?
To approve the May meetings K1 for the Economic Development Board.
And Alderman Tompkins, you second that? Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item M, presentation 2024 borrowing, introduced by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director, presented by Todd Traves, Senior Municipal Advisor from Ellers.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Todd Taves from Ellers. He is on loan to us as Mr. Ferris, Dave Ferris is on vacation. So Todd is taking his place this evening, and he will go through our pre-sale report for our 2024 promissory notes.
Thank you. You have a copy of our pre-sale report, and I've also got a very brief slide presentation. I'm going to share my screen and walk through that quickly.
There it is.
So the purpose of the note issue you're considering this evening is basically to fund your 2024 capital improvement projects. Summarized in this first bullet, I would note that this does include funding for projects within TID 13. This will be a general obligation note, meaning it's secured by an irrevocable pledge of property taxes, and that would be the paying source, although we do expect that TID number 13 will pay its share of the note. This is a tax-exempt issue with a 20-year term. You will have prepayment privileges starting on March 1st, 2034, or any date thereafter. In terms of how we raise the capital, this will be put out to the public markets. We'll look at the schedule in a moment, but on the day of sale, we will take bids from interested underwriters across the country, and we'll make a recommendation based on which underwriter provides the lowest true interest cost to the city. The resolution before you this evening has a bond size of $9,050,000. For housekeeping reasons, we break that into the portion that we will pay from the levy versus the portion that we will pay from TID 13. That breaks out as $5,380,000 for the levy in terms of the par amount of the notes, and then $3,000,000 $670 that would be allocated to TID 13. We will have interest earnings that you will accrue as you're spending down these funds on the projects over time. And we also account for the estimated cost of issuance, but the important number is this line here. That is what the notes will produce in terms of the actual funds for projects being $8.9 million, plus that interest earnings that we see up here will also be available to spend on the projects. In terms of the repayment, again, this is a 20-year note issue. The levy portion, we've got payments structured in a way that I'll show you in a moment when we consider the remaining 4 years of the capital improvement plan, provide for essentially a level tax impact. The TID portion is structured around the cash flow of the tax increment district, which we'll also look at in a moment. So again, two different repayment schedules embedded within the same overall note issue. And we're showing on an estimated basis, total interest expense on the obligation as well. Again, interest rates are estimated will be determined by competitive sale through that process. The total principal and interest column on this slide includes the schedule we just looked at, as well as projected debt service for the other 4 remaining years in your capital improvement plan. So what we're showing here is existing debt only, other sources of revenue that you have available to pay for portions of that debt. I'm sorry, this is the change in the levy over the prior year. This already nets out the other available sources. So this is our net debt service levy. We add in that projected debt service levy for this issue plus the capital improvement plan, take back out the TID 13 portion, and we come up with a new projected debt service levy going forward. And back to my comment on how we have structured the notes, those payments are intended, along with the structure on the future issues in the capital improvement plan, to result in roughly a $50,000 increase in your levy for debt year over year through that 5-year planning period. And when we look at a projection of growth within the city tax base, that works out to be essentially a level impact, even though we are adding projects, because again, we do have debt falling off. This graph represents the utilization of your debt capacity. So the state of Wisconsin allows you to have debt principal outstanding of no more than 5% of the city's total equalized value. That would be depicted by this orange bar. The city has a more restrictive policy where you limit yourself to 65%, which would be the blue bar. When we take into consideration, again, this issue, as well as the remaining planned issues in the capital improvement plan, we would be at a high point of 46%, again, measured against the 65% limit, and then projected to be declining a couple percent each year after. This is the projected cash flow for TID number 13. So what we've done here is carried over that repayment schedule and placed that within the overall cash flow model for the district. And the important point here is that, again, we're deferring some of the principal repayment and then ramping up to larger payments in the later years as this tax increment is projected to grow, such that we would have an annual surplus as well as a cumulative surplus balance rolling forward each year. This indicates that based on these projections, the TID is expected to be able to generate revenue to carry its portion of the debt with the projected early closure in the year 2039. Just to give you a sense of where the market is right now, the interest rates we are using for this projection, when we look at that and kind of roll that up on an average, what we're assuming is 4.36%. We've had several sales for Wisconsin villages and cities just over the last couple of weeks, and we've been seeing these true interest costs coming in the low 4s. So we always add a bit of a hedge in there to just provide some room in the plan, knowing that interest rates go up and down on a daily and weekly basis. When we look at the trend over 3 years, this represents sort of that artificial money policy we had on the heels of COVID, so quite low. But where we are right now is just above the 3-year average. If this graph was extended to a 10-year, and particularly to a 20-year time horizon, we're actually right about what the average cost of capital has been over that period of time. So interest rates seem relatively high compared to where we were a couple of years ago, but when we take a longer term view, we are actually pretty close to the norm. In terms of the schedule, assuming you wish to proceed this evening, we do have a call scheduled with Moody's Investor Service as part of the note offering, and anytime we go to the public markets, we go through an update with the rating. We would send that offering document out the week of July 2nd, and then on your council meeting date of July 9th, we would again take those competitive bids and bring you the recommendation for award with closing and receipt of funds scheduled for July 25th. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the council? Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you so much. In page 5, the annual taxes for 420,000 property, do you know what the number was for 2023?
I don't off the cuff.
And I had one more. The debt capacity for 2024 will be 46,000, and that's because of our borrowing for the TID. Does that also? It seemed like we had an earlier presentation that was also putting in a police building borrowing. Is that correct?
Jennifer, do you know if that is included within the CIP that this is built on?
We did run scenarios each way. I'm not seeing a list of projects in this presentation. I can follow up with you on which projection we are presenting here. That plan hasn't yet been approved, so my guess is it is excluding the police building at this time.
Okay, yeah, that would be great, just because we're close to our debt capacity. Is that right? So we'll need to know if that's in there. Thank you.
You're at 46%. With this issue, so measured against your, internal limitation of 65%, you've got a margin of roughly 19.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Todd, for that enlightening report and notes.
My pleasure.
Item N, request to approve resolution number 2024-21, providing for the sale of approximately 9,500,000 general obligation promissory notes series 2024A, presented by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director.
So this resolution just summarizes the presentation just given by Todd. So I would be looking for your approval in passing a borrowing of not to exceed $9,050,000 on resolution 2024-21.
We have a motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Fire. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item O, request to approve budget resolution number 08-2024, repurchasing undeveloped parcels in Daniel's Addition by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director.
In 2021, the city purchased a parcel of land now known as the Daniels Addition, and it was subdivided into 23 lots. At that time, the city entered into some pre-sale agreements for 14 of those lots and closed on 12 of those. As part of the developer's agreement, should the developer change its mind and decide not to pursue building on the lot, the city would be obligated to repurchase those lots. The city set aside an amount of money within the EDB fund to accommodate the potential repurchase of all lots still outstanding, which would have amounted to $322,500. At this time, we have had a request to repurchase 2 lots in the amount of $74,659.77. Should any of these requests be made, this budget resolution is not to exceed the amount of $322,500, and amounts would be transferred to the expense account to repurchase those lots as those agreements come up. So at this time, upon approval of this resolution, we would be actually transferring the $74,659 with the opportunity to go up to the $322,500 as needed. With that, I would take any questions.
We have a motion by Alderman Stauber, and that is your motion, Alderman Stauber. Second by Alderman Tompkins. Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. If I recall, the way this was written, we weren't obligated to buy these back.
Yeah.
We had some serious discussions about this, and I just question why we're moving forward and why we're saying that we are obligated, because my memory tells me that it was not that black and white. So I don't know if anybody could maybe fill us in on that.
I'm not looking at the exact language in one of those development agreements right now. I'd have to look back at that. I know that there's a point now where we've hit after a couple of years where, quite honestly, if the developer is not going to move forward, we'd probably like to do that and be able to find somebody else to build on there. And if, in fact, this budget resolution setting aside those dollars is approved, I think the intent is to push those folks and say, look, are you still going to do something? If you are, great. Let's set up a new timeline, for completion of your project, and let's go. If you're not, we would look at buying them back. Now, if there's concern about spending the money to buy them back, let's talk about that. But truthfully, we have individuals right now who own lots and they're really not doing anything at the moment. But your question is still a good one. Does the development agreement mandate it as opposed to giving us the right to? And I'm honestly forgetting exactly which of those two wordings there is right now.
Just as a follow-up, I believe that is what it reads, so I just didn't want there to be any misunderstanding about that. I don't know what the advantages are actually at this point to buying them back. I was just hoping to have a little better discussion about what we gain by buying them back versus they're not selling like crazy. What purpose do we gain by doing so?
And I think if we have a serious response from someone saying, look, I'd like to do a new development agreement, we have the intentions of building within the next 12 months or whatever it is, we'd love to work with that. I think from the onset, we really didn't want to sell to speculative buyers. People would buy it and, think, yeah, maybe I'll resell it for more money later, or I'll build in the next 10 years. We want to see homes go up. So perhaps the people who've already bought are the people that are going to do it. We want them to do it. That was the desire when we sold them. If that remains the case, that would be the preferred avenue. But I think in this development agreement, we gave ourselves at least the opportunity to say, look, if it's not happening, we went into this to get homes, not to sell lots.
Alderman Wagner, then Alderman Weigel.
Okay, thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. The money to develop that subdivision, to put in the infrastructure for that subdivision, that was taken out of the Economic Development Fund. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and these funds will go back to the Economic Development Fund, or excuse me, what you're doing is you're reserving the amount of money that's been paid down in, so that it's, that money is sort of frozen in the Economic Development account. It can't be used for any other project. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you put a marker on it. It's a restricted, reserved. Is that it?
Restricted, yes.
Restricted, okay. So, and that is our total liability if everybody were supposed to do it. So
correct.
It can't be any worse than what you're showing us.
Correct.
Thank you.
Alderman Weigel.
Thank you. Yes, my recollection is the same as Mr. Riley's. I thought we had the right to buy it back. We weren't obligated to, but I don't think that's neither here nor there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Barber, you had said that the hope would be that if we were to buy them back, the hope would be to resell them to someone who is interested in developing those plots. Have we had anyone check in on the availability of these plots to build on them at all, or are we going to be seeking that in the future here?
Ashley Frederick has been our listing agent on those parcels, so any contact has been made with her about potentially buying one or more of the lots out there. So I'm not particularly aware of people saying I'd like to get lot 25 or whatever and being told that, you know, it's already been sold to someone else. I don't know that one way or the other. But I do know that we're not handling these directly, so I'm not aware of inquiries as they come in.
Good enough for me. Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Weigel?
Aye.
That motion passes.
Thank you.
Item
That motion actually failed.
Pardon me?
Why did it fail?
7-2.
I don't know why it did pass. I don't know why it tells me it.
Oh, because women's not here?
It needs 7, so I don't know. We're okay.
Oh.
It's
yeah,
a
needs,
software.
It needs 7 affirmative votes, but yeah.
We have 7.
We have 7 affirmative votes.
Item P, first reading of ordinance number 1513, abolishing the Economic Development Board. A request made by Councilmember Stauber, presented by Gross Stauber, Councilmember District Number 6.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the first reading, and you have a copy of ordinance number 1513 before you. In short, it's to remove a layer of bureaucracy and how we deliver economic development that currently isn't adding a lot of value. And it kind of stems from the discussion about the access to the 205 fund, Economic Development Fund, and comments were made that, you know, so if we don't have access to that fund, why should we have an Economic Development Board? And it got me thinking about the efficiency and effectiveness as our government in pursuing economic development. So I don't really have a lot of information to share, but if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. I guess a couple of examples jump out at me is that, you know, we're actually impeding some of the economic development. The facade renovation program downtown is a good example, or called now Business Revitalization Program. There isn't any activity, and we're in construction period right now, but because we don't have a program to offer any of the downtown residents, it's detrimental to our economic development. So one example.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none, this will move forward 2 weeks from tonight for the final vote.
No.
Item Q, request to adopt a new compensation plan for non-represented staff and to approve the first step in implementation of the plan, adjusting pay rate as of July 1st, 2024, presented by Sarah Dressel, Human Resources Director, and Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director.
Sorry, just looking for the presentation.
Okay, sorry for that long pause. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we want to take some time to go through the compensation plan recommendations from McGrath Human Resources Compensation Study that was completed in the final report given by Milena recently. This presentation is a group effort between Human Resources and the Finance Department. So we will be kind of taking turns jumping in here. I'll go ahead and start things off. So in 2018, a 15-step structure was created. At that time, some title changes were made, updates to some job descriptions occurred. This was a total update to our compensation plan. With this plan, steps 1 through 5 of the scale had a 2.5% increase between the steps. Steps 6 through 10 had a 2% increase between steps. And steps 11 through 15 had a 1.5% increase between steps. So once an employee would reach the top of the step scale at step 15, they would then annually receive the COLA increase, which has been between 0% and 2% depending on the year. At the time of implementation in 2018, it was recommended by McGrath that a compensation study or an update be completed every 3 to 5 years. So in 2023, Common Council approved completing a market update to our scale, not a total compensation study. Excuse me. The following were factors that McGrath identified as reasons why there was a need to complete this update, and they do include overall market conditions that have significantly changed over the years, and inflation factors that have occurred across the board in the private and the public sectors. Additionally, the market adjustment, or COLA, that has been completed over the years since 2018 has not been enough to keep our scale market competitive. The study completed by McGrath concluded that at a minimum, a 10% adjustment to the salary range was needed to realign the salary ranges to the current market rates. So the journey to get to what is being recommended tonight. So this has been a journey to kind of determine what is the best scale to utilize now that we have comparable data and market information. In 2018, a 15-step model was created and has that 30% overall salary range from step 1 to step 15. This structure was the first time the city had opened up the ranges above the market rate. Market rate in this structure is a step 5. And once an employee has reached step 5, they are meant to be earning a salary that is above market rate. This is dependent, though, upon the structure having increased yearly to match inflation. And unfortunately, that has not been the case year to year, which is why the structure was in need of a change in 2024. Since the 2018 comp study, there has been a significant shift in the labor market and overall market conditions. So the small incremental steps between a 15-step model aren't effective in maintaining employees at a competitive placement in the market or for employee retention purposes when they can see what their positions are going for in other municipalities or in similar positions in the private sector. After the initial research was completed by McGrath, the first recommendation was to change the scale from a 15-point scale to a 12-point model. Or a 12-step model, sorry. This model would have a consistent increase between the steps to allow continued progression in pay for employees in instances where the city might not be able to offer a COLA. All step increases would be equitable to each other in that 12-step model. But after further discussions and additional work with the finance team on where the city is financially compared to what was set aside for compensation changes, it is our recommendation that the best model for the city right now is a 9-step model. This provides a consistent 2.5 increase between each step with a 10% spread on both sides of the midpoint based on the overall market rate for each position. The city can consider adding additional steps in the future as the market changes or when a market update would be completed in the future. The recommendation would also be that employees be moved to the closest step on the new scale to their salary that they would receive on July 1st of this year without the employees receiving a decrease in wages. This method would not take into account tenure in current role, though. In a future slide, I'll walk through an example to kind of explain this a little bit in more detail. In Appendix A, it does discuss T lanes, and it is part of our recommendation. So due to our fiscal constraints and what was budgeted for compensation changes for 2024, McGrath presented an option to potentially move forward with a 9-step scale, but to allow for one or more temporary lanes, or T lanes, to be added before the start of the scale to slowly adjust some employees onto the scale. So this is common for municipalities that do have financial constraints. If a municipality has one T lane, it is recommended to only utilize that T lane for 1 year. So if someone is placed on that T lane, the following year they would be officially moved into the 9-step scale and the T lane would be removed. When reviewing employees in our current 15-step scale and where they would be placed onto the new scale, it was determined that financially it was ideal to have one T lane. So an employee placed in the T lane would be there for a year and then enter the 9-step scale in 2025 at step 1. The T lane would then be removed in the future. So who goes into the T lane? I've placed some statistics from McGrath that McGrath had provided on this slide to help in answering that question. Approximately 35% of our workforce currently has 2 years or less in their position. Approximately 63% of our workforce has less than 5 years in their position. So this means the majority of those employees are likely to be at a step 1 to a step 5 on our current scale, depending on where they were hired in at. Because this recommendation from McGrath states that an overall 10% increase to the scale is recommended to start, the starting rate of the new scale for some employees was significant. Moving them to the T lane would still provide them with an increase and financially allow the city to potentially move forward with this compensation scale. In the next slides, I'll show again an example. Additionally, new hires that we would be hiring in would be moved into that T lane. This would be due to many current employees who are already on the higher part of the current scale within their pay grade, so step 5 and above, that would be moving in the new scale to probably a step 1 or a step 2. Having the T lane be the entry point allows for some compensation separation between employees. So this slide kind of walks through, I used civil engineer 1. We don't have anyone in that position currently as an example. So this is looking at 2 employees. One is a civil engineer 1, and they are on a step 2. They have 2 years of tenure in their current role. The other is currently at a step 8, but has 10 years of tenure in their role. They are at a step 8 instead of a step 10 due to the last compensation study. So just to give a little context. The step 2 civil engineer on the left is currently at $62,046.40 per year. And with this year's increase, if no scale change, like if we do not adopt anything, would take them to a step 3 with a 1% increase to the overall scale, which would be $64,368.51. Civil engineer is becoming incredibly difficult to hire for, so the market has caused the need for an elevation in pay grades from a pay grade 130 to a pay grade 131 on the new scale. So looking at the new scale with a T lane, the T lane step is $71,614.40 per year for a pay grade 131. A step 1 is $74,484.80. And using the recommended implementation of moving employees to the closest step without causing a decrease means the recommended step for this employee would be the T lane. Moving them to the T lane is approximately a 13.4 increase for this employee to get them basically onto the new scale. No T lane and moving them to a step 1 would be 16.7% increase. Next, the step 8 civil engineer on the right. They are currently at $71,115.20 per year, and this year's increase would be $73,170.86. So that's the step up plus the 1%. And looking at the T lane, this employee would be making less than they would if they got their normal increase, which would go against the recommendation of moving employees to the closest step without causing a decrease. So the recommended step for this employee would be a step 1. This is approximately a 4.5% increase for this employee to get them onto the new scale. No T lane, if we did no T lane, would mean that the 2-year in position employee would be at the same step as the 10-year position employee and position. Just for some context, some very rough numbers, without having a T-lane, there would be a financial impact if we just went with the scale without a T-lane, would be around $25,000 just for the rest of this year. So that's half a year. So before Jennifer comes up to walk through some of the financials and provide some context to everything, I wanted to go through a little bit of information that was provided in the packet tonight, just because I know there was a little bit of confusion regarding Appendix A, which was a listing of all of the pay scales. So first, the overall market update was provided in the packet from McGrath. It gives some really great detail. There's a lot of great statistics, so if you are needing kind of a refresher on what Milena has presented, it's a great document. Appendix A is also in there, and it does include actually 3 documents, even though it looks probably more like just one big, huge document. So the first part of Appendix A is the original recommendation from McGrath. It does not take into account any CPI adjustments. That's because we are already through 1 year of the original study. This recommendation also is without a T-lane. So that's the first couple of pages of Appendix A. The second is the official recommendation for tonight that takes CPI into account, as well as adding the T-lanes. And you'll identify this one because it has a green bar that goes through it if you're looking at it. That is the T-lane. The third is the same as the T-lane document, except it just doesn't have the T-lane. So you'll see that the numbers match each other. If approved tonight, there are several things that would need to occur. So just to kind of give a little bit of information on that. If approved, the scales used for each position would need to be updated in our Tyler Munis system. This would be quite extensive for our payroll department. This is what controls payroll for each pay period to ensure the right wages are being paid to all employees. Additionally, policy 3.800, it's our compensation plan administration policy. With the changes to the scale and any other items such as CPI that has been discussed and other compensation factors, they would need to be added in and updated within that policy. So that would be a top priority for an upcoming finance, budget, and personnel meeting. And if there are any questions or concerns from staff regarding this overall recommendation or anything concerning the recommendations that we're presenting tonight, they are encouraged to bring those to their supervisor or department head's attention as soon as possible so that the department head can reach out to human resources to determine any next steps that might need to be taken. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to walk through a little bit more of the financials.
Okay. All right, so before we get into the numbers, I just want to kind of redefine what we're talking about. Costs are going to be presented for the salaries and wages for employees who are on the position control list, excluding represented and libraries who have their own pay scales. Related expenditures that are dependent on the wage amount, WRS, Social Security, and Workers' Comp insurance are currently estimated to be an additional 17.65%. This could change a little bit. WRS often changes the amount we're required to pay in. So that is an estimate based on today's value. The budget for 2024 numbers include the step increase in CPI under the current 15-step plan. So with that, under the current budget for the 15-step plan, salaries and wages are budgeted to be $7.765 million. And I've included the amount with benefits below just as a reference point. Under the original 12-step plan that was first recommended from the consultant, the salaries and wages would have been $8,598,000. And so we refined that with the 9-step plan, which brings us to just under 8 million, which would have brought us a little bit over what we had planned in our contingency for purposes of increasing wages. So we introduced the T-lane, which brings us on an annualized basis wages of $7.94 million. So below that, we see the variance to our current budget for each of those steps. Please keep in mind that that $176,000 variance is for all employees regardless of fund. I also wanted to point out that the compensation study recommended that the city choose a CPI indicator to annually adjust the recommended scale. The consultant recommended the Wisconsin Employee Relations Commission CPI urban percentage. The city typically uses the Midwest urban, all urban consumer, not seasonally adjusted scale for any of its other items where we have to adjust based on CPI. The scales are very similar, as I'll show in an illustration. This schedule walks us through someone earning a base wage of $35,000 based on the years 2019 through 24, based on our actual wage increase, and then the Midwest CPI index. Going through the exercise based on our annual increases, the employee would have been making $37,701. Had we adjusted for the Midwest CPI, that employee would be making $43,812. The schedule below walks us through that same example using the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission index, and under that scale, the employee would have been making $43,955. So for all intents and purposes, pretty close. And so we, to be consistent in our calculations, are recommending to go with the Midwest Consumer Price Index for implementing increases in our wage scale. I just want to walk through some of the budget numbers, breaking out that $176,000 by fund. So our salaries and wages get charged throughout different funds in the city, and this breaks down our budget by those funds. You can see about 75% of our total wage scale is charged to the general fund, and then from there it goes to our wastewater and EMS enterprise funds, the internal service fund, capital projects, communication, and there is a small allocation for municipal court. Taking into account the 9-step with a T-lane, in comparison, this is the cost of the plan broken out by fund. So on an annualized basis, that would be $120,000 different. We implement our plans on a half-year basis. So we are looking at a half-year impact of just the salaries and wages of about $60,000 in the general fund, and then spread throughout the others. And as a reference point, I included the benefits that are related, which puts us very close in line to the amount that we targeted for contingency for implementing this plan. Look forward to a full year's impact in 2025. The impact to the general fund will be just under $6 million, with a total cost across all funds for the specific group of employees being almost $8.2 million. And then the very last line, will tell you the increase over 2024 by fund. So in the general fund, we would be looking at an increase of approximately $330,000, and overall just shy of $472,000. As far as costing, that is all that I had for you, and we can entertain questions at this time.
I have a motion by Alderman Stauber and a second by Alderman Giles. And Alderman Stauber, would you please give us your motion?
Yeah, the motion is to adopt the new compensation plan as presented.
And Alderman Giles? Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay. So at the very beginning, when we had the 9-step plan proposed, every year there was a 2.5% increase. Now, is there a 1% increase?
The 2.5% that I referred to was between the steps. Yearly COLA, which is what is generally done, is between 0 and 2%. One year we had a 2% increase, I believe, but most years it's been usually 1%.
So the 2.5% between the steps is considering or factoring in the COLA? No, it's not. Okay. So what we have right now between the steps, what percentage increase would that be?
So on the 15-point scale, it depends where you're at. So steps 1 through 5 is 2.5% between steps. Steps 6 through 11 is 2, and then 11 through 15 is 1.5.
Okay. So this is a question for Jennifer. This new 9-step program, every year they would go up a step. So every year there's a 2.5% increase. I'm wondering if the acceleration between what's happening now, between these 15 steps and the increase, as opposed to putting it in 9 years, if that's going to be a really fast acceleration. I know that's kind of a out there question, but.
For the first 5 steps of the old plan, it's the same. It's the 2.5%, because the concept of the old plan was start someone at 1 or what have you on the lower end of that scale, get them quickly. At that point, step 5 represented market. So there was an acceleration, and then from thereafter, it was tailored down because you were assumed to be at the market, provided you are also adjusting the scale for COLA. So it's kind of a 2-step process when we think of our wage increase. You get a step, you get your incremental increase just for moving along in your career, and then you get the COLA as determined by in the past, it was recommended through the budget process. The consultant is now recommended we pick a measure and use that as the basis for the COLA piece of the adjustment.
Okay. When people move from the T lane to a step, and so they jump up, they finally get on that step 1, their salary jumps up. Do you also add the 2.5% that year? Or do they just jump up in whatever percentage that jump is?
So like even for the civil engineer one that I had provided, so when they move to the step 1, that is going to take into account COLA. So it's not necessarily 2.5% unless COLA that year happens to be 2.5%. It would be whatever we're adjusting the scale to is what they would get plus moving to that step 1. So step 1 is basically adjusted with COLA, and then they would end up at that step 1 rate.
So both the COLA and the step?
No, I mean, yes and no. The T lane is where they're at, so they would be moving to step 1, but step 1 is going to be adjusted based on COLA. Okay. So it is both, but it's not 2.5%.
Okay.
It depends.
You already answered that one, so thank you. You answered a question in the middle. So we're looking at this year or next year, if we adopt this, 330,000 added to the budget.
In the general fund.
In the general fund.
Yes.
And we want to retain employees. So the next year, would we anticipate that this number would be higher because people are continuing up the steps?
It would, it will depend on your mix of your employees, but yes, we would expect it to be higher also because of people moving up a step as well as receiving the CPI adjusted movement of the scale. So yes.
Okay. So Jennifer, I'm going to ask your opinion, if you don't mind. I want to pay our employees a fair rate, and I want us to retain our employees. I think that's a very high priority, but I also want to make sure we're fiscally solvent. So can we do this?
This is very, very new. This is developing the budget before the budget. The idea tonight was to present the annualized cost. We have not yet built this into the overall budget. These numbers that you see for 2025 would be input at this time if we adopted this plan. Nothing else is yet in there, so it's hard to say at this point in time exactly the impact on the whole budget. What else is going to be sacrificed in order to accomplish this task? I also want to remind everyone this does include vacant positions at this time. Will they always be vacant? We don't know. There's, there's 5 significant vacancies that have been vacant for the past year. So part of our 2024 budget did take that into consideration. That would be a determination to also take into 2025. How much of this increase do we exclude because we anticipate vacancies to continue?
And did you hear any feedback from department heads of if we do this, we might have to cut other things? Did anyone weigh in on that?
We have not yet talked in depth with department heads on a group level about implementing this plan. The numbers really just came to us at the end of May, so we are trying to make a decision in our normal time frame of July 1 for an increase. So we have not had those in-depth conversations at this point.
Okay, thank you. One more question. So sorry. This is for Sarah. Is there going to be any, I know the last time we did this, there was an appeal process for some employees, or is there a plan to have an appeal process for individual employees where they fall on this step?
So if there are any questions that employees have or concerns, they should definitely reach out to their supervisor or department head. From there, those folks can reach out to me, and what we'll do is on a case-by-case basis determine what the next steps should be. No formal process for appeal, only because this was just a market update, not a full-blown compensation study, but definitely mechanisms in place if there are questions and concerns to address those.
Alderman O'Reilly, and Alderman Weigel, and Alderman Spiros.
Thank you. May have a simplified version of this in my mind, but what it all boils down to me is wants and needs, and those employees are the needs. And I will support this and cut wants anywhere we have to. This has been one of our biggest problems in this city, is retaining and recruiting people. I applaud your efforts on this, and I will be supporting it.
Alderman Weigel.
Thank you. How are you compensating for compression here? Because if we're going from a 15-step to a 9-step, aren't we going to risk compression again?
So most of the employees, as you saw kind of in the civil engineer one example that I provided, even being a little bit higher on the scale currently, does kind of, because we're making such a large shift, it does move a lot of employees down. I think Jennifer can probably explain a little bit of like kind of a little bit of the breakout. I mean, it's rough numbers, I think, but as far as compression, like this does help with some of the represented to non-represented issues temporarily, as long as we can keep up with scale movement years to come. But as far as compression goes, what's going to happen pretty immediately with this, because we can't move employees from the current step that they're at now to the current that step in the new scale, you're just going to see a lot of people. So I guess compression, you're going to see a lot of people all in similar steps on the scale because of fiscal restraints.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that compression then? Are we compressing this?
It's basically squishing people together within their pay grade, yes. But it's not compression between like pay grades, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm not explaining it well.
I guess I'm going back to the example you had with civil engineer one there, where I think, and I'm going from memory here, but I think originally there was about an $8,000 or $9,000 difference between those two. And then by the end of the adjustment, there's only a $3,000 or $2,500 difference.
It kind of would have been that way regardless of a 9-step scale or a 15 or a 12-step scale, just because the adjustment that we're making right now is moving the scale itself, the ranges, so significantly up, because we had to make that 10% increase that from a financial standpoint, we just can't move people to the step that they're currently in to keep space between a tenured employee, someone with 8 years within their pay grade, to someone who has maybe 2 years in their pay grade.
Let me jump in for a second. We all get your point, and we've been seeing it. I've been in meetings for the last couple of weeks with Jennifer, Sarah, and Jordan, our accounting manager, and we don't like this part of it particularly, but if we'd have brought to you something that did what I think you're picturing in terms of keep that separation, you'd be looking at the dollar amount and saying, can't afford that. And we're trying to, it's a really tightrope we're trying to do for our employees, plus for the council and our financial well-being. But yes, it does create exactly what you're hinting at.
So do we, and I understand and I appreciate the foresight with that, but if that is the case, if we are aware that there's going to be some degree of compression here, and the fact that we've addressed this previously, knowing that compression is an issue for some employees, can we take any additional steps to keep retention here? Because like Mr. Riley said, I mean, retaining people is huge. And right now, with the labor market the way it is, being poached is very easy to happen. So if we can't necessarily pay them more per se, is there any other thing that we can do? I'm just thinking out loud here, and I apologize for putting you on the spot. That's not my intention. I'm just thinking out loud.
Oh, no, it's the exact same things that we've been thinking ourselves as we've kind of gone through this process. So some of the things that we've talked about, and I think it would kind of be really to the council's prerogative of how you want to kind of direct us to go. I think there's certain things that we can certainly bring forward to council as options. There's just, unfortunately, a cost to all of that. So that would mean that we'd have to look at prioritizing and cutting other things. So, we've looked at several things. The vacation piece was a kind of a cost neutral type of thing that we did that will help hopefully with retention or even just getting employees in the door. So we're going to continue to go down those paths. Absolutely. You'll still continue to see things come up to council. But as far as working on what you're exactly talking about, I mean, options could include, could we do something in January based off of, budgeting things appropriately? Could we do something next July, something different that's based more a little bit on tenure? Certainly. It kind of depends on the direction that this group kind of provides us and what, again, what other things we might be able to make adjustments for. And I don't know if Jennifer wants to add anything to that.
I really don't have anything more to add. Statistically, if I were to go off memory, we had about 50 employees on the 15-step plan, probably step 5 and above, which was considered market. Under this plan, that drops from step 5 and above to 20. So it does actually scrunch people to that lower level, but we were taking into consideration that everyone is getting an increase on the scale above and beyond that 15-point scale. Nobody is losing a dollar, even though the perception of where I'm at on the scale in terms of a step may be perceived in a negative way. The dollars still show that you are better, all employees are better off under the new plan. Certainly incrementally, we can look at specific areas of compression and what that would mean. I think our objective at this point in time was, do we move forward with adopting this plan, getting everyone an increase in line with the scale, and then as a phase 2 or 3, starting to look at those different levels of what else we might need to do for compression, retention, et cetera.
And I think you just touched on this, so just to clarify in my head here, this won't be the last time we see it. This is mainly us not pushing it through, but approving it at a larger scale, and then we'll see it once or twice again at a more fine-tuned, if that's even the correct way to phrase it, but like a more micro scale, if you will.
I would envision that to happen as employees learn and see where they fall on the scale. I would definitely envision that we revisit certain areas as they come forward.
Okay, one final question here. As far as, I guess, revisiting and moving forward with this as implementation, what do we think as far as like a timeline goes? I know you said July 1st for some of this, but do we have a rough idea of the whole project, if you will?
I think, our implementation plan is July 1. Budget begins now for 2025. So this, should you adopt this plan, the next step is for us to create a model within our budgeting software to plug these numbers in. We can always set aside an amount in our contingency account specifically to address additional pay scale issues in the 2025 budget.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Alderman Spiros?
Okay, so I just have a couple of questions. I want to go back to some of the numbers. So I believe you said the total cost for 2024 with benefits and everything, was that $471,750?
That is the increase of over 24 into 25. So that the 25 budget would be the 8.148750 number, and the total budget for 2024 under the 9-step with the T-lane was $7,941,000. So that's where that 471,000 is coming from. That's the increase for 2025.
The increase for 2025. Yep. Okay, and the total, that was with benefits and everything.
I will have to. No, I will have to get back on that. This could just simply be the wages, but I will get back to you.
Okay, and then you said that we had a lot of that set aside in contingency. I thought I read somewhere where we had $79,497 set aside. Where did I read that at?
That was in the memo.
Okay, I knew I seen it somewhere. I'm like,
you did.
The full report, and I'm like, where is that at?
So in 2020, when we were developing the 2024 budget, we were in the midst of this study, and we budgeted as usual with the 15-point scale with the 1%, and then we stuck the additional 70,000 away in anticipation of needing to make this mid-year correction to the scale.
Okay, got you on that. So I do share the same concern. I took the same notes that Andrew did when you put up the example of the engineer. So, the first person, he's going to be put into the lane, and then by next year, he was going to just be a couple $1,000s less than the person who has been here 8 years. So to me, that's compression. You can tag it however you want. That's compression. And I understand that everyone's getting a raise, but but does that cause a bitter pill to somebody who's been here 9 years and they're only making $2,000 more than somebody who's been here then now 2 years? And then do we run the risk of our older employees leaving for that specific reason? Because it sort of feels disrespectful. And I understand there's no perfect way to implement this, but I just feel like, is that going to cause a problem with people who have put their tenure in here and have stayed and are just personally offended that somebody with much less experience is now just a couple $1,000s less than them? And then also just, I know you probably can't answer that or there doesn't even warrant an answer because you kind of already talked through it. But this is also sort of compounding. So, on our old scale, we gave this 2.5, step increases, 1 through 5 or whatever it was, or 1 through whatever step it was. But what we have to really consider is now that these increases are still going to be 2.5, but they're going to be based on higher wages. So 2.5% of everybody having a higher wage is going to come out to like what each year?
That's the 471,000 year over year. So
it'll be 470
for
71,000 for 2025, and then you would predict the next year it would be even slightly higher because your 2.5 is growing on a higher number every single time. Okay, so all right. Yeah, and I think I expressed this before the meeting started. The issue with me is I think our employees are our most valuable asset. They always are in a service industry, and this is a service industry. With that said, it's a very difficult decision for us to make and say that we're going to improve this and we're going to spend this money, and we haven't been able to look at what we're going to have to cut to compensate. And that's a really hard decision, and I want people to understand how difficult that decision is. And this is the way it plays out in my brain. We go ahead and we approve this, then we come closer to October when the actual budget gets done, and we're said, hey, you guys got to make up this money for these raises. And God forbid, we don't know what we're going to cut. And come on, end of October, I may be having regret. I may be saying that was a terrible idea that we had to cut this certain thing or this certain thing or this certain thing to make up for these wages. And I just want people to understand how difficult of a decision this is because of the way that we have to go about doing it, making this decision before we really realize what the impact of cuts will be related to it.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Rebecca said, and I agree. We are jumping into this at a time that's difficult to do this, but keeping in perspective, the employees are the most important part, and I don't know how we can do it. We have more than enough money, in my opinion, in areas in the city that at least I would consider wants. Nobody likes spending more money, but it's proven to be a necessity right now. So again, I'll support it, but I do have a question on how does this impact us for this year? If we're implementing this on July 1st, what is the outcome or outlook look like for the rest of this year?
So in the general fund, and this will include benefits, it'll be a $70,000. We're going to use that contingency that we set aside in the general fund. The other funds have not set aside money specifically for this issue. Now, communications, if you think back to the previous discussion, they had a fund balance of $140,000 left. This additional just under $6,000 would be taken away from that available fund balance. Municipal court, there's very little impact there. We charge, they will be charged higher for the service of having a court. So no real impact there. In infrastructure, the impact for this year, this is our streets capital project fund, will be just under $7,600. based on the way there's pits and quarries that generates revenue, a small amount of revenue in that fund would be able to absorb for this year that additional $7,600. If you recall, wastewater has a very healthy available net position available for spending. The EMS fund, the impact there is minimal at this point. And the internal service fund at just under $7,000 also would be able to absorb for 2024. And then we build that into their budgets going forward.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, ladies. Item R, review plan to build permanent restrooms on the Winslow Family Plaza property. Request made by Councilmember Wagner based upon new information received presented by Ed Wagner, Councilmember District Number 5.
Thank you, Mayor. I appealed under the parliamentary order of rescission because, as you all know, that once we pass something in here and then slam the gavel down, it's closed. And basically, I got information or had ideas that I wanted to present that came out after that, and I thought it was important that the council know about those other possibilities. One of the things that came out was our consultant, Vanderwall and Associates, and our planner with them, Jackie Mish, who was working with us on the original plan of the plaza, and she sent us a letter or an email on May 30th, 2024, and it was sent to Steve. And I think the council members were copied on that, I believe. But I wanted to make sure, I know that the public wasn't. That's one thing I was sure about. I'm going to just read through that real quick. It's a very short letter. It says, hi, Steve. Our perspective is that the restrooms proposed to the north side of Winslow Family Plaza would have a negative impact as viewed from 2nd Street, and it might crowd the existing pergola to the south. We understand that the city has looked at several locations for the restrooms and that each location has advantages and disadvantages. We feel that the restrooms would be better located on the east side of the plaza in the parking lot. Although a few of the parking spaces would be lost, this location would provide essential facilities while minimizing the visual impact of the restroom building. This opinion would maintain the integrity of the original design of the plaza and preserve the city's significant investment there. I know there are a lot of considerations and moving pieces in this decision, but we appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on this. And that's what they're getting tonight, to weigh in on this. I have received just a couple of phone calls from people, constituents and non-constituents, people who live in other districts and other wards, that are just blind mad about $250,000 for a set of bathrooms. And I got those calls after this came in. The hopeful thing, and we just heard tonight of the possibility of moving into another building close to it. That I think that's almost an ideal thing. It sounds almost too good to be true, but I think what we should do is leave this open until after the bids are received, and during that period of time, have a competent contractor look at that and tell us what they think the proposal that we heard about tonight was about. By the way, there was this proposal had been made, but somehow inadvertently got left off the list. And I remember asking Steve if he had seen that, and he said no. And then he came over here and he said, "Oh, yeah, you mean this?" And I said, "Yeah, that's right." So it was given a brief overview when we passed the other budget, when we passed the other plan, but I think we need to just be very cautious where we tread here because this is a big deal. And I want to make sure if we do it once, we do it right and we do it for the right price. So with that, I will just leave it open and ask that at least I hope we aren't incurring any other costs out there at the moment, but for this project. But I don't remember when the bids are due. 2 weeks?
No, tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Well, that's convenient. Anyway, the point is, with that in mind, we can tie down one last possibility and make an informed decision to see how much money we're going to save the citizens, if any. And with that, and I don't pretend to be an expert on this of restrooms. And I dare anybody here to say they are. Anyway, I just wanted to make that point available to you. And I did use an old parliamentary provision so that we could so that we could at least say this and at least slow down the business. So that's where I want to leave it right there. So thank you.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. I was just going to inquire with Steve. I know typically these bids have a 30-day window. Do you know if that is the case with this one? Because it would give a little time to...
Yeah, I don't know. This one's actually being handled by Bozen as opposed to us directly. It may well have that timeline. I still would say, though, I mean, whatever this body wants to do is fine. I mean, and Justin and I have said this before, if I can take it for a second. This project started with the council years ago. It was the council's direction to move it forward. It was the council's direction years ago to move it up in the capital improvement plan. It was council's decision last summer to put it where it is. And I totally understand the rationale for not doing that. But if location is the issue, I would suggest you just consider that tonight and make a determination on that. If you really honestly in your heart of hearts think it's the wrong location for these restrooms, you may as well even do it before the bid opening. Because if you open the bids and the bids are favorable and the bids are under budget and you still have this heartburn and it comes back to the fact that you never really liked the location, that's a different issue. That's a different topic. You can play it either way you want to, absolutely. I mean, you can wait till the bids come in tomorrow and make a decision later, but if location really is the issue, and I've heard this from people, who are in the audience tonight, from others, I know it's out there on social media, I know some of you have talked about, is this the right place to put these things? You may as well decide that prior to even the opening of the bids and just tell folks that we're just not going to do this project, as opposed to finding out the cost and then that's $175,000. It's under budget, but you know what? We don't want to do this. Why would you go through that? That's my personal opinion. Take it with a grain of salt or take it for what it's worth.
Alderman Marshall.
I never liked the location. We did pass this 7-2 on the council. I do really appreciate the Howards coming in and giving us, talking to us and explaining this to us. And yes, it was pretty late when they came in regarding the possible new location that we could do. At this point right now, with the bids be coming in tomorrow and the uncertainty yet because of the property not being sold, we don't know exactly what that would look like there. Now, granted, the Howards gave us a great explanation, everything like that, but if they are selling it, we would need to hear from the new owner, who declined to come 2 weeks ago because she didn't own it, didn't feel comfortable talking about it. I love what the Howards have done with the city the last 10 years, and I absolutely love it, and I love that they come in here. And I don't like where the bathrooms, the location are. I said that when we first voted on it. But for us to know exactly what it would look like for being in that Blodgett House building, we would need some sort of what it would look like, what the cost would be to move the doors, and what the rent would be from her if she closes on the property, or when she closes on the property. So I'm not quite sure what to do tonight. I mean, if the bids come in tomorrow, when do you present that to us? The next council
No, they
meeting?
would go to the Board of Public Works on the 17th. So that would be, actually, this coming Monday,
next
you would
Monday.
see them. And, like I said, I mean, if the price is the issue, I think you could see what that turns out to be and then make your decision then. I was just kind of throwing up, trying to determine whether the bigger topic is the price or the location.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Spiros?
Thank you. For me, I can tell you both are an issue. I don't like the location. I had stopped into the new ice cream place and kind of stood there in his doorway and looked out and you know, it would just totally, it would look ridiculous, actually. And the fact that they're right next to the picnic tables, and it's just, it seems so strange to me. Why that decision would ever have been made seems very odd to me. The price has always been a problem for me. I did not vote for this originally, and my votes have remained no and will remain no, because I just think that, number one, 2 stalls is not sufficient. If it was, we wouldn't have 10 porta potties or whatever it is we got sitting there now. It's just cost prohibitive. I think I have not heard from a single citizen that supports this project. And I've heard from a lot of them. I didn't go out and survey 55 people and ask them, do you want a toilet in the park or not? But I will tell you that the people I have heard from have been overwhelmingly, are you kidding? That's ridiculous. That's what you get from the people in the public.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. I think I would really stress the point to Mr. Varshow's comments that, you know, how quick it opens. I do understand that, but you typically have a 30-day window. Your typical bid process lasts 2 weeks. So I see no reason we couldn't get people in there to get some numbers together, at least, even if there's not a design on it, to get us some, I mean, you're talking about over double the toilets. You're getting your green room, which we know is also a need that we're obviously not going to have with this one. I think the process of accepting this, even if it is within budget, is ridiculous. I actually voted to move this up in the CIP because I understood the need for the bathrooms. Through that CIP process, that was moved up, and the comments were made to get rid of the porta potties. Now, at this point, I don't think we're going to completely get rid of the porta potties, but the whole concept of why that was brought up is not going to be met by moving forward with what we're doing. I just think we can do so much better. So, yeah, I think it's the only logical approach is to take a stronger look at this and see if we can get more bang for the buck. Not block the 2nd Street corridor area. And I'll also stress on this that even though this was omitted through that process when we voted on this, I have also heard that a lot of the other information is not correct. And I brought that up to you already, Stephen. I haven't seen anything back on that yet. But from what I understand, there's some significant inconsistencies in what the council was told when that vote was made. So with that fact coming into play also, it's extremely concerning to me what we were hand-fed and what is potentially the reality of what happened there. It all just does not smell good to me.
Well, a couple things if I can. First of all, I want to clarify my earlier comment. There's no reason why you can't go through the bid process tomorrow and then make your decision later. And I talked to Justin about this today. He's out of the office, but he clarified with me that there's no legal obligation that we've signed on to that we absolutely have to take the low bidder. We're bound to what happens tomorrow when they open these things up. So that it may look, I think his perspective, and I kind of agree, it may look rather odd and not very good if it comes in to be a good bid and we tell some low bidder that, sorry, we're not interested. It might be better to say, look, we never liked the location and we decided to deep six it. But this is entirely your call. I'm not trying to force some new vote today one way or another with respect to the location. I just want you to know that if that really is the big thing, you might as well, deal with it now. As far as the other opportunities, I know I wrote you an email, you and I had an exchange, and I am setting up a meeting, with the city attorney and the finance director and the Parks and Recreation Director to look at how did we get here? What were some issues, whether they're financial, whether they're administrative, whether they're legal potentially, and to be getting back to you with a report as to, if there were any irregularities or inappropriate things that were done. I sit here in front of you not prepared to comment on that. I've seen his timeline, I've talked with him, but I don't want to sit here tonight and talk about those kind of questions. I just want to find out for right now, what do you want to do with this going forward? And then we'll follow up on those other issues and leave it at that.
Alderman Spiros?
Okay, well, this is again, new information. I didn't know that Mr. O'Reilly was concerned with other potential issues. And I don't know what those are. And now you're gonna, I just don't feel comfortable making a decision because we don't know. He's obviously heard or knows something that he brought up to you, but we don't know what that is. I don't know what it is anyway. I don't know if anybody else here knows what it is.
I'm just going to lay it out here. He's questioned, among other things, he's questioned the context we had with some other property owners, what was actually said, what was actually offered, and those kind of things. I've talked at some length with the Parks and Recreation Director about those issues. He shared some of that, at least part of that, in the memo that he did with the timeline. Maybe there's a desire to go deeper on that. But sitting here tonight, I really don't want to comment on conversations that I personally wasn't.
I get that, and
I wasn't even involved in first.
And I'm not going to ask you to do that, but what I'm saying is, I think that you have to get to you got to get to the bottom of whatever these concerns are, to see if they're valid or not valid, and then we all need to know if there is something valid.
And as I've said this like 2 or 4 weeks ago, as a result of some of these things that are hanging around out there, if this body wants to hit the pause button and say, let's let this go for now, we'll revisit it later, we'll look at other opportunities for the balance of 2024, whether they be privately owned buildings around there or whatever else, construction elsewhere on the site, along the east side into those parking spaces, or we can indefinitely put this off. Honestly, Justin and I at this point are literally just looking for your direction, and we'll go over everything that happened in depth, and we can meet with council however you want to, but sitting here right now with what do you want to pursue this, and to what degree do you want to, and how do you want to proceed? That's entirely your call. And we accept whatever direction you go. And I'm serious. It's not a personal thing. We just want to know how you want to proceed. And if you hit the pause button, then hit the pause button, and then let's dig deeper at some of these things that you believe are opportunities. I'm not going to debate those. I'm not going to debate that there might not be other conversations that could be held with other potential landowners, or to revisit the ones that we've had with the ones we've talked to before. But I'm not going to argue here. Just decide if you want to continue with what you know, or whether you want to hit the pause button or do something else. I'm not trying to be argumentative. Please, that's not my goal. I understand the questions and the concerns.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, item S, suggested items for future agendas. Seeing none. I'm sorry. Okay, it just came up right now. Yes. Okay. Alderman Tompkins.
I apologize. That was a slow trigger finger there. I would like a report from Mackie on what is being done to recruit and promote our certified site. So just a report on that, what they're doing for promotion, and then also if they've been talking to anyone, what are the sort of things that those companies are asking for?
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Yeah. I guess I would also like to have some sort of a discussion comment. We had comments said to the council a few weeks back about enforcement of our ordinances. I personally have been receiving calls lately about the same type of issues. And I think we really need to have an understanding, at least I do, for the constituents in the city. How do I respond to them when they tell me that ordinances are not getting enforced? Is this a a call by ordinance to decide if they do? I just think we need some clarification because I'm put in a very difficult situation when they're telling me they're not being, I like Bob, I like Kayla. It's not anything personal. It's just, what is the protocol for enforcing our ordinances? And I think that would be very important for not just me, but also the public and the rest of the council to hear.
Sounds good.
Anything else? Move on to item T, adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Develop agreement for a project in TIF District Number 15. Okay, I'm sorry, we jumped ahead.
It's got a mind of its own.
That's right. Okay, if somebody would just tell me who.
Oh,
I don't see it. I see nothing on my screen. Trust me, I see nothing.
Oh.
Okay, right here it is. I see nothing on my screen except for votes.
Motion by Spiros and second by Wagner.
Okay. Now, all those in favor to go into closed session, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
We're in closed session. Thank you.
Can we take 10 minutes this time?
That's what Marshfield